Welcome everyone back to the public session of today's ethics meeting. I want to thank everybody for the guidance on the in-camera part of it. So the item that we have to deal with is the election of a vice chair. I want to welcome Mr. Fisher to the committee, and we are now going to proceed to the election of the vice chair. I'm going to ask the clerk to conduct that portion of this. So go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the first vice chair must be a member of the government party for this committee. So I'm ready to hear the motions. Ms. Dama?
I will nominate Darren Fisher as vice chair.
Okay. So it has been moved by Ms. Damoff that Mr. Fisher be elected the first vice chair of the committee. Are there any other motions?
Anyone else need a nomination? I got you. Okay.
Pas d'autres motions? So it has been moved by Ms. Damoff that Mr. Fisher be elected first vice chair of the committee. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion?
Yes.
There we go. Carried.
Okay. Want to say congratulations, Mr. Fisher, on becoming the first vice chair. Look forward to working with you on what is a very productive and very busy committee. So congratulations, sir. Do you have a speech written that you'd like to give?
No speech today, sir. I'm pleased to be nominated, pleased to be the vice chair, and I'll do the absolute best I can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Monsieur Villemure, vous avez quelque chose?
Oui, Monsieur le
Mr. Villemure, yes. I would like for us to examine the motion tabled by Mr. Chong on the Winnipeg lab documents. Apologies. One moment, please.
Okay, do we have agreement from Monsieur Villemure to resume debate? Mr. Green, I see your hand up. Is this on this, or? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Green.
I mean, I'm happy to make sure that there's consensus to resume the debate, but I did want to speak to it if that's the direction.
Thank you, Mr. Green. So right now I need consensus on resuming debate. Do we have that? Go ahead.
Doesn't someone have to move the motion to resume debate?
He's moved that.
You've-
He's
so
moved
he
that
has?
already.
Okay.
So I'm seeking consensus on
Okay.
that. Okay. Agreed? Okay. Allez, Monsieur Villemure, s'il vous plaît.
Go ahead, Mr. Villemure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to propose an amendment to the motion. I'm going to read the amendment. We have paper copies. The clerk should receive it as well. That it be amended by adding, and I'll give you the full text after. Adding, take on a study for three meetings. B, removing transmission of information in the Government of Canada. And C, changing the words, the fact that the government is basing itself on its overclassification and the reasons of the government, close parentheses. Adding that with 109 that the government respond. E, by adding for 1 hour per witness. F, changing paragraphs A to E with the following. A, Anthony Rhoda, former chair of the House of Commons. B, Philippe Dufresne, law clerk and parliamentary advisor at the time of the facts. C, Ian Stewart, ASPC president at the material time. And by removing G and H. H, adding a paragraph at the end. J, and any other witnesses that the committee deems necessary. I'll read the motion in its entirety. And so it would be as follows. That in light of the February 28, 24 tabling of the Winnipeg lab documents which contain the government's own findings concluding that the People's Republic of China and its entities infiltrated Canada's top microbiology lab, a national security breach representing a very serious and credible threat to Canada, and given that access to this information had been denied to all Parliament and all Canadians by the government for several years, that the committee undertake a study pursuant to Standing Orders 1083H7 and 6 and 7 of the collection of transmission of information and intelligence within the Government of Canada, and asks, pursuant to 109, that the government respond and invite the following witnesses for 1 hour each. A, Anthony Rhoda, former Speaker of the House of Commons. B, Philippe Dufresne, law clerk and parliamentary advisor at the time of the facts. C, Ian Stewart, ASPC president at the material time. D, Minister of Health, the Honourable Mark Holland. E, the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions, and Intergovernmental Affairs, the Honourable Dominique Leblanc. F, and any other witnesses that the committee deems necessary. Mr. Chair, this was brought to the Ethics Committee with the lens of access to information. I know that the Canada-China Committee is examining the Winnipeg Lab issue, but they have a different angle. They're looking at the sanitary matters, but what is in our mandate is access to information, and that is what caused an issue here. We don't want situations like this to happen again, and we need to have recommendations issued following studying this matter. This can't happen again without anything being done. Thank you. Thank you, Monsieur Villemur.
Amendment to Mr. Chong's motion. My understanding is that committee members have the amendment, and it has been distributed, Madam Clerk, in both official languages, correct? Okay, so I'm going to rule the amendment in order. I do have a speaking list that has started with Mr. Green, Ms. Damoff, and then Ms. Khalid. Mr. Green, on the amendment, please. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And obviously, I'm remiss that it took us having these amendments to have a real discussion about what had transpired prior to the March break. You know, it's with quite deep disappointment that the Conservative caucus has this tendency to bring the same motion to every committee across all of our standing committees in a very theatric way. You know, I had a conversation directly with Michael Chong, and there was a time when he was a reasonable guy. He was a practical guy. He was some would even call him a progressive conservative. I believed him to be a man of his word. I recall having a conversation directly with him prior to the 106 meeting that was called by our conservative colleagues here, where he understood this was going to go to Canada, China. And that to duplicate it, I told him quite frankly, like there was no willingness on behalf of our party to see the same study happen, rolled out across all of our standing committees. And yet in whatever way he thought was appropriate, brought this to as a 106 to this committee, stood in and basically presented this for the news cycle. And I just want people to know, people from his riding, practical conservatives that are out there, that there are lots of conversations that are had at committees, prior to committees, around organizing our time, around the value for taxpayer dollars in the way in which we do our work. When it comes to 106s, it needs to be made very clear that those are for kind of emergency situations. They have to be very pertinent to the mandate, at least in my estimation, of the committee. And to see and to know that he knew that this was going to go to Canada, China, and still bring it here for the theater of that 1 week news cycle, I think is despicable. It's disgraceful. We always support access to information, at least I do as a New Democrat, and yet on principle couldn't support what they were trying to do because I knew it was duplicitous. I knew it was deceitful. And I certainly wasn't going to support it, which is why I supported the adjournment. I do support the clarity provided by this amendment because it's pertinent and relevant to the work that we do at this committee. It's within our mandate. And I think it is, you know, within a timeline that is acceptable for all of the other work that we have. Mr. Chair, you'll know that for quite some time, this has been a committee that seems to be a tail chasing the dog, not the other way around. And what I'd like to see is some focus in this committee. I'd like to see like open and honest dealings with the opposition side, with the government, that when you say you're going to do something, you stick to it. You don't come out pulling the rabbit out of the hat with some kind of surprises so you can score a short cycle news cycle or a fundraising letter or whatever the heck Michael Chong's agenda was when he came and visited this meeting. But I certainly wasn't here for it. And I wasn't about to disrupt, you know, the work of this committee to put precedent on something that he already knew was going to go to Canada, China. So I would say this to the opposition side folks, to all folks in this committee. If you're serious about operating within integrity and following kind of the courtesies that we have, even though we might not always agree on things, I'm for it. But if you continue with the procedural shenanigans to try to disrupt every single committee across the House of Commons so that you can then point at it and say, look, it's broken, when you're the one who's intent on breaking it. Just know this, for all the conservatives watching this, for the media who wrote stories, who didn't even have the courtesy to call and reach out and try to get, my rationale for it, I say shame on you, shame on you. So I will be supporting this. But I got to say, if you all are going to continue to bring pitch hitters into this committee to disrupt it, then I'll meet your belligerence with belligerence. That's all I got to say. So I'm looking forward to having a discussion on the amendments that Mr. Villamore put forward. I'm looking forward to working as a committee to hold government accountable, to make sure that our departments are held accountable, to protect our parliamentary privileges. What I'm not here for is your theater and your shenanigans and the circus. I'm not here for the circus. So with that being said, you can tell I'm kind of fired up because, I thought I was dealing with Michael Chong, who had, at least I thought, some good faith in his negotiations. And then he tried to come in here and pull the fast one, and just let it be a message to anybody else who wants to try to do the same. But when you do that, no matter what, I'm going to shut it down. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Ms. Damoff, you're next on the amendment.
Thanks, Chair. And I have a lot of respect for the honourable member from the block, and I appreciate him bringing these amendments forward. But having said that, last night, less than 12 hours ago, the Canada-China Committee started their study on this issue. And one of the things that's in that motion at Canada-China is looking into obstacles in obtaining the documents. Mark Holland, the Minister of Health, appeared last night, and he talked about this very issue and why the ad hoc committee was so important. And while I appreciate him wanting to bring these amendments and bringing the study to ethics, I think it makes more sense for Canada-China to continue their study and to include, the bloc can certainly put forward any of the witnesses that Mr. Villemure has brought forward to the Canada-China Committee. And if once they've completed their study and done their report, if we're not satisfied with what they've produced, we can always do a further study on it. So I don't think it's the right place for it to be here right now and for two committees to be doing concurrent studies. So we won't be supporting your amendments. Perhaps we will support something later on, but I think the right place for this right now is at Canada-China. And I think there's good work that can be done there on this very issue. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Damoff. Ms. Khalid, your hand's up. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. And first and foremost, I just want to say I express my gratitude to Mr. Villemure. Him and I served on the Winnipeg Labs ad hoc committee, did the important work, spent many, many hours together in a room, and ultimately, we're trying to make sure that our government, that the processes that happen are as open and transparent as possible. Now, I do tend to agree with some of the things that Mr. Green has said with respect to duplicating work in various committees, to have theater, et cetera, where I do realize that there is important consideration to be given on some of the issues that Mr. Villemure has raised. At the same time, I don't think that it's appropriate for Canada-China to have a meeting or to have a study, and then for our ethics committee to have the same study substantially, because Chair, as you would know, like, we can only move amendments that make little changes, not substantially change the report or what is being asked with the study. So Canada-China is studying this. In fact, there's only 3 witnesses that are different from their witness list and ours. And I would propose that those 3 witnesses go on and testify at Canada-China, and then we come back and look at it once their study has been concluded, and then we can see where the gaps are. Right now, I I would prefer that we spend more of our time dealing with the substantive issues at hand that that Canadians have told us. I mean, I receive emails every single day asking for updates on the social media study that our committee has undertaken, and I would love for that to be prioritized. I would love for us to be more efficient in how we do things in the House. And if Canada-China is looking at an issue, perhaps the best thing for us to do then, Chair, is for us to write to Canada-China and say, hey, can you also, while you're talking to the exact same witnesses that we're proposing here, -3, can you perhaps ask them these questions? Let's send them a list of the questions that we have, right? Instead of doing it all over again here in the Ethics Committee. It just doesn't make sense to me. And that's just one option. The other is that we wait until the Canada-China study is concluded and then we pick it up. I mean, we haven't started the study yet at all. And I think it would be best framed for us to kind of understand the context of where we're coming from before we start any study here in this committee. I do prefer option 1, in which we send our list of questions to Canada, China, and say, hey, folks, while you're at it, can you also look at this angle as well? Because you're dealing with the exact same witnesses, the exact same issue. Substantively, let's be a little bit more efficient with this regard. So I'll park my comments there, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Khalid. Monsieur Villemure.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie ma collègue.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her comments. You know that here we are specialists in access to information. That's what we hear about all year, and we're perhaps better placed than Canada, China to examine that angle of the issue. I would not want to redouble efforts. Perhaps Canada, China should send the access to information perspective to us because we are better suited to study that. But access to the lab by potential Chinese citizens is not what we're looking at. What I'm proposing has to do with the fundamental mandate of the committee. And if the issue is examined elsewhere, and coming back to Ms. Khalid's comments, well, perhaps that should be sent here for us to examine what is relevant to this committee. I think this is part of our mandate. We are specialists. We are experts on this matter, and I think it should be studied here. Thank you, Mr. Villemure. I believe that Ms. Khalid has raised her hand.
Thanks, Chair. And just to pick up on some of the points that Mr. Villemure has outlined, if Canada-China is taking a lead, would it not make sense for us to let them complete the process, write to them to say, hey, we're here at your disposal to look at whatever issues you need to look at in the greater context of things, and then have them send a reference to us if they need it. I really think that we can't just go one-offs on different on the same issue, different tangents to create different issues. I think that we need to let Canada, China take the lead on this issue, and if they feel that they need to give the Ethics Committee a reference on this issue, then let's follow their leadership and let's have them do it. It doesn't make sense for us to be parallel in the work that they're doing at the same time. So again, Chair, I propose that we write to them and we say, look, folks, you know what, we're interested. How about if you feel that there's, this branch of information that you think we should be analyzing, more than happy to receive that. And if we do receive a request from them, then absolutely more than happy to follow it. But I think we're being we're being a little bit too preemptory here with this respect. I think that we should let Canada, China lead this issue and let them give us a reference should they so choose to do so. I again really appreciate the the issues that Mr. Villemure has outlined, but I think that we need to be a little bit more judicious in terms of what we bring into our committee and running parallel studies, etc.
Thank you, Ms. Khalid. On the amendment, Mr. Housefather, followed by Mr. Green.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Mr. Villemure that his amendments respect our mandate. And we should study why it was so difficult accessing these documents. But as Ms. Khalid and Ms. Damoff have stated, I wouldn't want us to be redoubling the work.
By Canada, China, it says that pursuant to its order of reference on Monday, May 16, 2022, the committee undertake a study of at least 2 meetings on the matters revealed in the Winnipeg Lag documents, together with the broader concerns they represent in relation to Canada's national security, as well as the obstacles encountered in obtaining these documents. So it looks to me like, as well as the obstacles encountered in obtaining these documents, that the Canada-China study is indeed covering that question that we're now saying needs to be brought here. If they weren't, and it was only about the national security aspects, I would entirely understand and agree that it would make sense to have this committee study the other part. But given that Canada-China is also studying it, and the witnesses are essentially the same, we're making people come to 2 different committees to answer questions about essentially the same thing. And that's where I don't understand why we would be doing that. So my proposal, again, peut-être je peux, Monsieur le Président, dans la prochaine...
Perhaps I can ask Mr. Villemure, because it was in the motion for Canada-China, and I believe he was there when the motion was adopted, because I see his name in the minutes, can he tell me what's different in the motion adopted by Canada-China and this one here? Because it seems to me that they're both the same on this matter.
Encore sur la liste.
Perhaps he can answer your question later. We're going to follow the list.
Green, followed by Mr. Fisher, Erskine Smith, and then Villemure. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Thank you. Look, we are creatures of our own domain, and we do have the ability to pursue whatever studies we want, right? And so I think for me, what's most egregious about what happened is it quite literally took, like, the PMO's office tried to sue the House of Commons to block this information. For me, this isn't just about Winnipeg Labs. This is about a culture of a Liberal government who has a culture of obstruction when it comes to our parliamentary privileges, quite frankly. And the fact that this, had to take a legal proceeding challenging the will of the House of Commons and a minority government is quite problematic. And so that's my interest in this. My interest is the overarching theme of the power of the PMO's office to keep information from parliamentarians. That is the mandate of this committee, and I think it's well within our parameters to do so. The clown show that Mr. Chong wanted to bring in here, I'm not interested in. But I am interested in this. And so for that reason, I'll be supporting the amendments. And I look forward to hearing, people can have a lot of opinions about Mr. Rhoda, but at the end of the day, he did the right thing here, I believe, in defending our parliamentary privileges, because it goes beyond this. If we allow any government in power, regardless of its party affiliation, to get away with that kind of wanton, I would say, abuse, we're setting ourselves up for future governments who may be even more reckless. And so we have to safeguard these institutions, and we have to protect our parliamentary privileges to be able to send for people, demand for documents, and make sure that evidence is provided here. We just had an entire day of privilege yesterday for people who did not want to cooperate with committee. So with that being said, that's my last statement on this. I'll underscore my deep personal disappointment in Michael Chong in trying to turn what I think was a very important and salient aspect for this committee to study into a 3-ring circus over the March break. And I would regret that were to happen again. And so with that being said, I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher, on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And as it's my first meeting, I've been absorbing everything that's been said by all the speakers, and I certainly appreciate all the comments made. For me, MP Khalid was bang on. This study is being studied right now. Liberal members on that committee supported this study to move forward, and I heard just 12 hours ago that this study was taking place. So I would say that leave it to Canada-China, and if something falls through the cracks, if something falls through the floorboards, and that something that we need to look at down the road, I would support that. But at this particular moment, I wouldn't support the amendment.
Mr. Erskine-Smith, on the amendment, please. I know you just stepped in here. Do you have a copy of the amendment, Mr. Erskine-Smith?
I do.
Okay,
Yeah,
wonderful. Go ahead.
Thanks, John. I wanted to speak specifically because I'm a member of the Canada-China Committee, and we started the study last night. And when Michael Chong did bring the motion to us, and it received unanimous support ultimately, the rationale was one, claim of delay in acting on national security considerations, and two, it was a concern around access to documents in a timely fashion and in a fulsome fashion. And so both of those matters are within the ambit of the study that we have already undertaken at the Canada-China Committee. We heard from Minister Holland last night. We heard from the director of CSIS last night. We heard from PHAC last night. We've got witnesses scheduled for this Friday. We're doing 2 meetings a week. So look, I'm just visiting today. You do what you do, but I would caution against just duplicating things that we're already doing at Canada-China. And if you are going to pass a study like this, make sure you're working hand in hand so you don't have the same witnesses, you're not hearing the same evidence, you're not duplicating efforts for no reason whatsoever and just spinning your wheels and wasting your time. So again, do what you want to do, but just I think if you do pass this motion, make sure there's cooperation as between the chairs of both committees, because otherwise we're all wasting our time here.
Mr. Erskine-Smith, Monsieur Villemure, it's fini. Okay, merci. I don't see any other discussion. So on the amendment, I am going to ask if we have consensus on the amendment. Do we have consensus on the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No? Okay, so I'm going to have to call a vote on the amendment. Madam Clerk, if you want to do the roll.
So the vote is on the amendment moved by Mr. Villemure to the motion that was moved by Mr. Chong in February. Everybody heard the terms of the amendment? Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Erskine-Smith?
No.
Mr. Fisher?
No.
Mr. Housewater?
No.
Ms. Khalid?
No.
Mr. Barrett?
Yes.
Mr. Brock?
Yes.
Mr. Couric?
Yes.
Monsieur Villemure?
Oui.
Mr. Green?
Yes, I vote for this.
Yeas 5, oui 5, nays 5, non 5.
I vote yes.
Yeas 6, oui 6, nays 5, non 5.
Okay, l'amendement proposé.
The amendment proposed by Mr. Villemure is adopted.
The main motion as amended. I don't see any further discussion. Do we have consensus on the main motion as amended?
Yes.
We don't.
No, Chair, we don't have consensus.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Khalid. So I am going to ask the clerk to call the roll on the main motion as amended. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
So the main motion as amended, Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Erskine-Smith?
No.
Mr. Fisher?
No.
Mr. Housewater?
No.
Ms. Khalid?
No.